Welcome to Understory Files. Every headline tells a story. But sometimes the real story lies in the questions that remain unanswered. Some crimes are solved quickly. Others take years. And then there are the rare cases that seem to refuse resolution no matter how much time passes. The Zodiac Killer is one of those cases. More than half a century later, investigators still do not know who the Zodiac Killer was. The murders happened decades ago, yet the mystery continues to fascinate detectives, journalists, and amateur sleuths around the world. But while the killer's identity remains unknown, the victims are not. Behind the cryptic letters, the coded messages, and the media attention were real people whose lives were suddenly and violently cut short. To understand the Zodiac case, you have to start with the victims. The first confirmed attack took place on December 20th, 1968. That night, two teenagers were parked along Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. The area was quiet and remote, the kind of secluded spot young couples sometimes chose for privacy. The teenagers were Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday. Betty Lou was just 16 years old, an honor roll student known for her kindness and academic dedication. David Faraday was 17, a high school wrestler with his future still ahead of him. It was their first date. For the two teenagers, the evening was supposed to be simple and memorable in the best way possible. Instead, it became the beginning of one of America's most infamous unsolved murder cases. At some point that night, a gunman approached their car. What happened next would shock investigators. Both teenagers were shot. When authorities later discovered the scene, they found the bodies outside the vehicle. The attack had been sudden and brutal. At the time, investigators had no idea they were dealing with a serial killer. But months later, the case would take a disturbing turn. The next confirmed attack occurred on July 4th, 1969, Independence Day. This time, the victims were parked in a remote lot at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California. Inside the car were 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin and 19-year-old Michael Mageau. Darlene Ferrin was a waitress, a young mother, and a woman remembered by family members as vibrant and caring. She had a daughter who was still a child at the time. Her sister would later say that Darlene had always been someone others looked up to. That night, Ferrin and Mageau were sitting in her car when another vehicle pulled into the parking lot. The driver initially left, then returned. Moments later, the attacker approached the car holding a flashlight and a gun. Without warning, the gunman opened fire. Michael Mageau survived the attack, though he was seriously wounded. Darlene Ferrin did not. But the violence that night was only part of what made the case so unusual. After the attack, someone called police. The caller calmly reported the crime and directed officers to the location of the victims. Then the voice on the line said something else. He confessed to the murders of the teenagers from the previous year. It was the first time investigators realized the crimes were connected. And it wouldn't be the last time the killer contacted authorities. Over the coming months, newspapers across Northern California began receiving letters from someone claiming responsibility for the murders. The writer referred to himself as the Zodiac. The letters were filled with strange symbols, cryptic messages, and coded ciphers. Some of the messages appeared to challenge authorities, almost daring them to catch the killer. One cipher sent to newspapers in 1969 would later become known as the 408 cipher. When a married couple eventually cracked the code, the message inside shocked investigators. Part of it read, "I like killing because it is so much fun." The Zodiac Killer wasn't just committing murders. He was turning them into a public spectacle. The next confirmed attack happened on September 27th, 1969. On that day, a young couple was enjoying a quiet afternoon near Lake Berryessa. 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard and her boyfriend Brian Hartnell had gone to the lake for a picnic. The setting was peaceful. The sun was out, and the lake was a popular recreational area. But the calm was suddenly broken when a man approached the couple wearing a dark hood and carrying a weapon. At first, Hartnell believed the man was attempting a robbery. But when he offered money, the attacker reportedly refused. According to Hartnell, the man said he didn't want the money. Instead, he had come to kill them. The attacker tied the couple up before stabbing them. Brian Hartnell survived the attack. Cecilia Shepard did not. Later, investigators would discover another chilling detail. The attacker had written messages on the door of the couple's car, listing the dates of previous Zodiac attacks. It was another way of claiming responsibility, another way of ensuring the crimes would be remembered. The final confirmed Zodiac murder happened just weeks later. On October 11, 1969, a taxi driver named Paul Stine picked up a passenger in San Francisco. Stine was 29 years old. He was working as a cab driver while pursuing his doctoral studies at San Francisco State University. For Stine, it was just another fare. But the passenger he picked up that night would become his killer. The taxi eventually stopped near Washington and Maple Street in San Francisco. Shortly afterward, Paul Stine was murdered. What made this case especially disturbing was what happened afterward. The killer sent another letter to a newspaper. Inside the envelope was a piece of Paul Stine's shirt, stained with blood. It was proof that the writer was telling the truth. The letter began with a chilling introduction. "This is the Zodiac speaking." The message claimed responsibility for the taxi driver's murder and once again connected the crime to the earlier attacks. By this point, the Zodiac Killer had become a national headline. The combination of violent crimes and cryptic letters created a mystery that gripped the public. Investigators launched one of the largest manhunts in California history. But the killer was never caught. Over the years, many suspects have been proposed. One of the most widely discussed was Arthur Lee Allen, a man who lived near Vallejo and had previously been convicted of other crimes. Some evidence appeared to connect him to the case, including witness statements and items investigators found suspicious. However, Allen was never charged with the Zodiac murders. He died in 1992. Other theories have emerged over the years. Some researchers have suggested different suspects entirely. At one point, a group of investigators claimed they had identified another man as the Zodiac. But the FBI has repeatedly stated that the case remains unsolved. Despite decades of investigation, the identity of the Zodiac Killer is still unknown. What remains are the victims. 5 people confirmed to have lost their lives. Several others who survived attacks that could easily have ended differently. And a mystery that continues to haunt American criminal history. Even today, new investigators, historians, and amateur sleuths continue to study the evidence. Some believe the case will eventually be solved through modern DNA technology. Others believe the killer may have died without ever being identified. For the families of the victims, the question remains the same. Who was the Zodiac Killer, and why were these people chosen? More than 50 years later, the answers are still missing. But the stories of the victims remain. And remembering those stories may be the most important part of understanding what happened. Because behind every infamous crime, there are lives that deserve to be remembered. This is Understory Files, and beneath every mystery, there is always another layer. If you want more deep investigations into real unsolved cases, subscribe to Understory Files, and we'll see you in the next story.